Hello and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Jamie and I are here with a really special guest today, and I know Jamie is super excited about taping this podcast episode. This is going to be really fun. So we have a guest with us, Megan Fowler, and she is a former fertility care practitioner and founder of Restore Fertility Care. And she recently has ventured into something fun and new called the Align Cycle, which is to help entrepreneurial women understand their bodies and work in alignment with their cycles and hormonal rhythms to get more done. So, Megan, we are so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ladies. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome, Megan. Okay, like Teresa said, Megan, I am super excited about this because I love entrepreneurship. I grew up in a family that we're just really focused on that kind of self-starting and that leadership. And then you pair it with our fertility cycle and the genius of our hormones. It's like the perfect cocktail, in my Jamie heart. So Megan, tell us a little bit about how you got this started. And we saw that, again, you're a fertility care practitioner. So yeah, give us a little background.
Yeah. So I was introduced to the idea of fertility awareness in my, early 20s. It's actually, I was dating my husband at the time, and he turns to me and he's like, "So what do you think about natural family planning?" And I said, "I don't know what you're asking me. What is it?" And so he starts to tell me, and he's got bits and pieces, right? But I've got questions. And so I was like, this sounds interesting. And then I kind of dove into it on my own, started researching, and I was like, wow, there's so much here that I wish I'd known. And so I started kind of learning casually. And then I ended up taking a class, a symptothermal type class on my own. And then I learned about NAPRO and how well that works to really figure out root cause of issues and to really, serve women the way they need in their reproductive health care. And so I decided to go ahead and go into that. So I did that for about 7 years, working with mostly women who were struggling with reproductive issues like infertility, hormonal imbalance, PCOS. And I loved a lot of parts of that, but I actually decided to take a step away after 7 years. It was okay, I know I want to stay here. I know there's a lot of work to be done. I was working on my own health. And so as I'm reading, I come across this idea of resting during menstruation. And that's really where it all started. And it's in traditional Chinese medicine, and I believe in other cultures as well. They kind of have this idea of taking a step back during your period. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I started trying it on a small scale. And I felt like it was really good for me, not just during that time, but throughout the rest of the cycle. And from there, I started making other tweaks and changes. And then I realized there's all this research out there, right? And I always say I knew the power of using my cycle to evaluate my health, I knew the power of using my cycle to plan my family. But there was this whole third level of, wow, I know I'm experiencing these ups and downs, right? These highs and these lows. And you kind of know it as a woman, and you can kind of reflect back, oh, that's why I had such a difficult week last week. Or, you feel it, but you don't really tune into it, right? You don't really put words to it as well as we could. And there's just all of this research out there about how our hormones and our cycle impact our mood, our energy, so many daily choices that we make, our, dietary choices, all of that. And they're all shifting, right? As women, we have these little shifts from day to day and larger shifts from week to week in how those are all impacting us. And so I also, Jamie, kind of love the business side. I kind of love the business side of Restore Fertility Care. And I was a business major, marketing major. And I also am passionate about women's health and fertility awareness. And it really is an amazing way to combine the two and to support ourselves as women and to support whatever call, we feel called to, whatever work we feel chosen to do, to kind of recognize that we need more rest and more awareness. And there are times we can push, and then there are times we need to pull back. And so, so I'm just grateful to be doing this work and to be sharing the message.
This is awesome. Jamie, I know I already am thinking of questions. So I would love to just like, I love the way you said like changes, shifts basically day by day, but big shifts week by week. Like that's a really good way to look at it, because literally there's no day of a woman's menstrual cycle that is the same. So there's these little shifts, but yet then there's these kind of overarching kind of themes or big changes that happen from week to week. So I love that. And of course, the better you understand the cycle, the more that makes sense. So again, just more people, go out and learn the menstrual cycle and the hormonal shifts, because it's so incredible. So give us an idea, Megan, of what that really looks like, and kind of how did you approach that first and foremost? And what was your week by week kind of, practical use of that information?
Yeah. So when I dove into the research, I kind of saw these four different phases, and they're not quite weeks, because a lot of people will say, you've got 4 weeks, and which we do, but there's one way to look at it, or even 4 phases of different times of like your fertility windows. But the way I look at it in terms of like how these hormonal changes impact kind of our work and the choices that we need to make in our schedules. Phase 1 is really starting a few days before menstruation. It's when you hit the low, right? And so just in that day or two, or depending on what's going on in a woman's cycle, if there's hormonal imbalance, your low may happen sooner because your hormones are dropping off, too quickly earlier, and you'll feel it. But usually about 2 days before your new cycle starts, I call that phase 1. And then into about the first 2 days of your menstrual cycle. And that's really the time where you are just physically and emotionally lower. And I call that the rest and the retreat phase. So it's your chance to kind of, ideally, you don't schedule too many outside commitments. You don't put a lot of expectations on yourself, and you just kind of, do what you need to do in that time. Maybe you're feeling great and you can still do all the things, but you don't kind of set yourself up to feel like I have to do all these things and I'm really not feeling it. It's not working. It's all too much. And that's just a really common experience, to feel overwhelmed or to feel critical of yourself in that time. And so you kind of take a little bit of the stress and the pressure off there. And then about chart day 3, we get a little bit of boost in some of our hormones. The estrogen slowly kind of begins to rise a little bit more. And what happens there is you kind of come out. So it's like you have a little bit of I don't know if a fog, but you're kind of in this like place, and then you kind of start to come out there. And so I call that the kind of like ease in and kind of like get back into, your work, right? Setting your goals for your cycle. So you kind of look at the cycle and say like, hey, what do I want to complete in the next, however many weeks in this cycle? What's my priorities? What do I need to schedule? What do I want to commit to? Get back into content creation or whatever it is, depending on your work. And that will take you through to phase 3, which when your time of fertility opens, right? Your window of fertility, based on the indicators that you're charting, primarily, or I should say the foundation of which is probably mucus. So if you're checking for mucus and you start to notice that fertile mucus, that's when you get like the extra bump, right? That's when the estrogen is really starting to rise at a much quicker rate. And then you're also going to get like a dose of testosterone. And this is a time where you just like feel really good, energetic. You can work for longer hours. You are more competitive. You are feeling like more ready to be seen and to communicate. Your linguistic skills are peaking. And so this is a time where the goals that you really want to hit, that maybe in another part of your cycle would take too much out of you, or, like would be a little bit much, like you can do it in this time. So this is like your connect and be seen. So whether your goals are related to connecting with people, networking, presentations, live videos, or maybe it's just like really intense content creation or whatever it is that you're doing, like this is a good time to do that. And then we know right after after ovulation, you got that shift. So you enter the progesterone dominant phase, but you actually still have, estrogen, and you still have a little bit of testosterone. So you still have some hormones working for you through most of that phase. And so this is a good time to like finish the things out. To contrast this phase 4 after ovulation to like your window of fertility. In your window of fertility, if you think about what's biologically happening, you are like more, I mean, our body wants us to conceive, right? So it's kind of like, okay, like what's out there, right? Kind of like shiny object syndrome, where you can kind of be distractible. And that energy kind of shifts in that post-ovulatory window or that luteal phase where you can do more focused work, which is really nice for completing, projects or, working on something for longer to finish it out. Maybe it's the editing of things that you were kind of brainstorming earlier, or just kind of, rough outlines of your content or whatever it is. So it's a great time to do that and kind of like nest, almost like you're kind of clearing your plate, right? Like, okay, I'm going to close some loops and I'm going to be able to better kind of take my little rest and retreat, which happens again at the end of the cycle, just a couple of days before your period starts. So that's kind of an overview of the basics of how I approach those changes and those different phases.
I love it so much because I read this book. Have you read the book Do Less by Kate Northrup?
No, but I would love to.
It's so good. Basically, this woman is talking about how she'd grind every day, and she wouldn't seem to get anywhere. But then once she started understanding her cycle and started working with her cycle and with her hormones, she was able to physically do less, literally, but accomplish the same, if not more.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so she was sharing, and just like what you said, Megan, like this idea of during that estrogen genius, like during that phase 3, when you're so creative and you're coming up with all these ideas, it's funny because, that phase is kind of shorter in relation to phase 4. And so it's like you come up with all these ideas. Praise God, that phase is only short, like it's shorter because you're going to need at least 10 days to 2 weeks to finish up all the ideas to tie them up. You know what I mean? I think about that, and it's just beautiful the way that women are made in that way, and how, as Teresa and I, with the Hormone Genius isn't just living fully alive within our physical body biologically. And, like you were saying, you can chart and understand your fertility to achieve and our health issues. But truly being a hormone genius is living within the genius of your hormones, even with productivity and our shifting skills as our hormones shift. And so, Megan, I love that this is your focus. I think it's so important. So important.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's so important to health, I mean, I think this is really comes down to, us as having health that we really desire, that all of us want to feel happy. We all want to feel like we have energy throughout the day. We all want to be able to meet the goals that we have set for us. And if we don't follow the rhythms of our body, what we know is that our health declines because we're not listening to those internal signals that says rest at this time, use the energy you have at this time, stop, focus, be mindful of quiet. There's just all these, I think, internal signals that we get that sometimes with the noisy world that we have and our chaotic lives, we sometimes can be like, I can't stop. I just have to keep going. I just have to keep going. And then what happens is your health crashes. And then you're like, well, it takes so much longer to pick up the pieces of that. So it just makes sense to be intuitive as women, as we are naturally, and listen to our bodies so that we are listening to those signals and tracking those things and be able to, take care of our health, take care of our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many outside expectations, right, that we internalize about what we need to do and how we need to do it. And that you're right. Like, I think we are all kind of inclined or kind of conditioned to kind of ignore, right? Ignore our bodies, ignore our changes, and just keep going. And it's really challenging, even women who are trying to do this, like it's a process of like, okay, what do I need? It's okay to rest. It's okay to communicate, like, I wasn't able to do all the things this week, right? I needed a little bit more time to take care of myself, to be in a good place, to better, serve others just as much as, right, to take care of ourselves. Goes hand in hand. So absolutely, I agree.
Mhm. And also, like, Megan, do you find that when women are, women, we need each other, right? We have girl talk, we need that community. And so it's common, that we want to unload onto our friends with difficulties. But wouldn't you say that it would be of service of our friend, like for this friendship agreement, to say, okay, if I'm really unloading on you and really like having a difficult time, ask me where I'm at in my cycle, because
Oh yeah.
right, like,
Yes.
something
Yes.
relieving about knowing,
Mhm.
okay, I'm self-shaming, or I'm mad because I can't get this
Mhm.
thing done, or I was so energetic last week and now I feel lazy, or now I feel that there's no shame. It's like your body needs to, and
Right.
that's not who you are as a human. I'm lazy now. Like, we think that,
Right.
oh gosh, what's
Right.
wrong with me? This is just how I am. No, actually, this is
Right.
part of your cycle. you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. Part of it is like a modeling and communicating. Like, when you need it, you share that with other women, and then they're like, oh, I can do that. I can pay attention. I will, there's a shift here. And then also, like you said, like in just dialogue and conversation, to be able to reflect back and help someone say, like, hey, like, where are you in your cycle? And then, light bulb goes off and you've made that connection for them. Absolutely. Really powerful.
Yeah.
So with your website, your business, and how you're doing this the aligned cycle, does it start with you teaching women how to chart? Is that kind of the first point? I mean, if they're obviously not charting to begin with, I mean, some women may come to you already cycle tracking,
Mm-hmm.
but do you, when a woman says, hey, I'm interested in this, give us an idea of what that process looks like, and how you actually coach them in this whole
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm. So I've had both. Most of the women who have come to me this far have already been charting their cycle, but I've had some who maybe are just really loosely using an app and they don't really know, they're using a predictive app that's telling them, right? So I do have charting resources. I'm not teaching a method anymore. I don't teach the Create a Model any longer. So I have a lot of resources to just guide them through and kind of help them really notice those shifts as they're, shifting into their window of fertility, and understanding their luteal phase length and how to, predict that. So I do have charting resources. But if you're just wanting to get started, I say absolutely, like, start charting your cycle, start noticing those shifts. And also a good place to start is journal tracking. I mean, you can also put it in an app. Most of the apps now have lots of places or lots of different ways to kind of track how you're feeling, but also journaling. It just, right, there's more space there. You can find deeper kind of insights sometimes if you're interested or able to do, a month or two of just journaling and say, like, how did my work feel today? How was my energy? How did my relationships or my communication feel? And then to be able to kind of notice those patterns. So you can do that as well. When women come to me and they join the program, right now it's a program where I have like an intensive session, and we kind of go through all the details of the shifts, what you can expect to feel, kind of this is the standard. How do you tune in deeper to how you and how you respond to your hormones and your cycle and your unique rhythms. And then also, how do we make these planning decisions to kind of optimize these windows? So that's what the intensive session looks like now. And then we have coaching calls that come, usually weekly or twice weekly, to kind of work through. And we create like what I call a cycle strategy guide, to kind of make some of those decisions and kind of lay out, a path for the women. But I will be actually putting together like a standalone course, because I think some people, they're good with like more hands off. And they don't want all the coaching, but they do want the information, and they do want to be able to do it on their own. So yeah, that's kind of how it works right now.
Mm-hmm. As you're speaking, I was just thinking about how, this is, of course, of interest. I think most women hearing this would be like, what? Like, I can literally leverage different parts of my cycles to work, to cooperate with like productivity. What? But I'm wondering, Megan, if you can kind of dig into You know, if we're altering those hormones, you know, if we're suppressing those hormones, what might be just the standard experience we have with our body if we're not able to notice those natural ebbs and flows. Someone's on, you know, synthetic hormones or something that suppresses that ovulation, what might be that experience?
So it depends on what kind of hormonal contraceptives you're on that are and how they're altering your hormones. But in general, you've got like this kind of baseline, right? Of depending on which hormones are going on or in your formulation, most of the cycle. And you're just kind of feeling the same. You're not having the same fluctuations, right? The fluctuations, like we said earlier, that biologically, like help us create life, we're suppressing those. And likewise, those fluctuations that are naturally designed to just be life-giving and creative in general, those are also suppressed. And so I think that's why, you know, a lot of times women say, like, I'm just feeling depressed, because you're designed to have these like beautiful hormonal cycles of, you know, interplay of highs and lows, and they're supposed to be in balance. And we're basically, right, we are taking the balance away from it. We are putting them ourselves into a unnatural place hormonally. And then, you know, maybe we're taking the hormones away for a withdrawal bleed week or whatever that looks like. And then we're going right back into the same kind of homeostasis that we weren't designed to be in as women in our reproductive years. So yeah, so it can be just, you know, negative consequences, of course, on the physical body, but also on our emotions, our energy, our mood, all of that.
And that alone, I mean, some women, again, are on, of course, birth control to avoid pregnancy or for like a health issue. And they're, like you started off the interview saying, again, like, we're not just charting or trying to understand our cycle for family planning or health, but even just this other component of just being fully alive within who you are, like the essence of who we are. So that's also an experience that women are lacking, not only if they're covering up that cycle with synthetic birth control. Of course, they're not getting a good sense of maybe some health issues that they need to be aware of and address, but also they're not getting a good sense of their essence as a woman. And so I wish that women, young girls, were taught this more even in high school. They're taught, again, about their health, hopefully about cycling if we're going in the classrooms. But then also there's this added beautiful component of our feminine design that, again, as young girls, they would find this so fascinating, but they're not even being told that. You know, so of course I want to get rid of my painful period because that's the only thing I think about when I think about my cycle, instead of thinking about all the beautiful things that actually come with a cycle.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think it's a great kind of lead in because young women, right, teenagers, like they're experiencing their hormones in maybe an even more pronounced way, right? And it's just really, it's a lot, right, to kind of deal with, and then to give them a tool, right, to say like, hey, like, here is how this works. Like, here is something that gives you some insight and maybe like a sense of control when you are approaching your period and everything in your life feels like it's falling apart. And there was actually, as I was diving into the research, when I kind of did that, there was this interesting article online where a woman was teaching young at-risk women to chart their kind of emotions and patterns in this way. And some of them would draw pictures. And she said that research shows that when young women get in trouble with like the law, that like 90% of the time it was right before their new cycle or during their menstrual cycle, like basically during their hormonal low, when they feel out of control, when they feel overwhelmed, when it's all too much. And she said that giving them this tool was so powerful when they started to really understand and have that insight and that awareness that, hey, this is all going to feel and look and be so much different, you know, the way I perceive it in, you know, a week or maybe even a few days, that was really so helpful. And so I feel like all women especially young women, can benefit from some more awareness, much more, because we don't have any really. I mean, just some knowledge of those changes and how they're affecting our mood and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've brought up that research before when I'm speaking to high school kids, and they're like, what? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. That women are more likely to commit their crime. Not that women are going out and committing crimes just because they're,
Right.
but for those who maybe were likely to be in a situation and at risk, that there's this correlation with it. It's kind of fascinating. So, and it all comes down to this. I mean, again, whether you're on hormonal birth control or you're not, if you didn't know how your cycle worked to begin with, and you didn't know the genius of your hormones and this beautiful kind of like energy around the whole thing, then you can't have the intuition because you didn't have the knowledge. So no matter what, we just want women to feel that connection and to know that it's okay to see your body and to see what's going on and connect it to who you are in the essence of your womanhood and your hormones. And that's the whole beauty of it all. So Megan, thank you. This has been great. I know Jamie probably has a last question she would love to ask you.
Yes, Megan, thank you so much. Such an important topic. Okay, so what do you wish every young woman knew about her hormone genius?
I mean, gosh, everything, right? But I wish, and I think that there is a shift here, which is hopeful, right? Like I'm seeing a shift in just basic level understanding of cycles, of the power and the beauty of our cycles. And I wish that all women knew how powerful they were. I wish all young women were really taught the basics of charting so that they could have that foundation of awareness. And I wish that they knew that there were better answers out there than they're getting for their health problems, because so often, as a NAPRO fertility care practitioner, so many people would come to me and they'd share their stories about them going to, a typical physician and kind of bringing their problems and kind of the path that led them on. And they just didn't know, right? They didn't know that the birth control pill wasn't the best option. They didn't know that delaying pregnancy for, maybe longer than they really wanted to. Some people were encouraged by their physicians, even after they were married, to wait for a good amount of time. And now they have, they're struggling with infertility. There's just so much there. So I wish all women had like a starter course in the basics of these things. And I kind of have a vision that I think we're getting closer to being at a place where they will, and these things will just be common knowledge. And then, maybe it's not all the details, but then women know that they exist and that they know that there are resources there they can dive into when they need them, or if they're interested in going deeper into certain aspects of their health, their mood, their energy, and, using it for natural family planning. So I guess just a greater awareness is kind of my vision and my hope.
Okay, Megan, well, how can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website. I do have a kind of an intro guide that breaks down the cycle into the 4 phases. So if you want to reference that, at thealignedcycle.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at thealignedcycle.
Awesome, Megan. Thank you so much. Again, I love this topic. It's not talked about enough. Even in the fertility awareness circles, I think this is kind of an untapped area. And so we just really appreciate your time and your expertise in this. And Teresa, do you have any other last questions or thoughts?
No, thanks. This has been amazing.
Yeah, Megan. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.